Everyone always begins this story by talking about the day in April of 1943 when 4 boys hunting for birds' nests in Hagley Woods made a gruesome discovery. But that's not where the story really starts. This story actually begins with a murder, with a woman who entered the woods alive and never came back out. The problem is, we'll never know that part of the story because what happened to her in Hagley Woods is still unknown. Her murder unsolved, her killer unfound. Even her identity remains a mystery, which makes the confounding details of her death, and the bizarre way that the killer chose to dispose of her body, and the eerie events that followed, even more haunting.
Every night is just like Halloween, as rock and roll this graveyard scene. Graveyard rock.
So we start our story in Hagley Wood, which is a forest on the Hagley estate near Witchbury Hill in Worcestershire, England. I'm sorry if I fucked that up. Listen, I'm living in New England, and the way that they pronounce towns that were originally English towns is so bizarre. Like, there is a Worcester here. Is this pronounced like Worcester, or is it Worcestershire? I don't know. Somebody let me know. I could have looked this up beforehand, but why would I do that? Why would I do that? Anyway, I did enough research, okay? I don't need to add pronunciation research to the roster. You'll understand later. I'm going to explain everything that's been going on with me, but this isn't about me. We're in Hagley Wood, okay? So at the time, Hagley Wood was on the Hagley estate, which was the property of Lord Cobham, also known as John Cavendish Littleton, the 9th Viscount of Cobham. So technically, the 4 boys who entered Hagley Wood on April 18th of 1943 were trespassing. These 4 boys were Robert Hart, Thomas Willits, Bob Farmer, and Fred Payne. None of my sources mentioned exactly how old these boys were, but the 4 of them had gone into the woods bird nesting, which is apparently a hobby of collecting bird eggs. Not like to eat them, just to like blow out the insides and keep them like some kind of collectible, which sounds like a kind of cute, like old-timey English boy hobby. But I went down like a little bit of a research rabbit hole on bird nesting, and apparently it got pretty intense sometimes. Like, there was this one egg collector that scaled a tree in the middle of like an active fire zone during World War II to get a rare zone-tailed hawk egg, and after storing the egg in his mouth to climb back down the tree, the egg got stuck. So he broke his teeth to get the egg out without cracking it. Okay. So people took it very seriously. But anyway, I think these boys were just like casual hobbyists, They were kids. They were out in the woods looking for some cool bird eggs. But they found a lot more than that. See, while exploring Hagley Wood, the boys stumbled upon this like weird old witch elm. And this one was like proliferated with these strange spiky branches. I mean, in my opinion, this looks like one creepy ass tree, but to these boys, it just looked like a great place for birds to make their nests. So one of the boys, Bob Farmer, started climbing the tree. But when he got up into the branches, he looked down into the trunk and saw that it was hollow. Hollow, but not empty. Because down inside the trunk, staring back up at him, was a human skull. Bob Farmer took a stick and fished the skull out of the witch elm, and he found that the skull still had wads of curly brown hair matted to the surface. Now, I don't know who the voice of reason was, because I'm picturing all these boys like it's like a Stand By Me scenario, right? They're all like different Jungian archetypes. So I don't know who the sage was who was like, let's put the skull back and get out of here, but somebody must have been the voice of reason. They put the skull back and they got out. And then they had to, discuss, I guess, on the way out, what they were going to do, if they were going to tell anybody. Because technically they were trespassing, right? So they decided and they agreed that they wouldn't tell anybody about what they had found, because then they might get in trouble for trespassing on the Lord's land, which I guess seemed like a bigger deal to them at the time than the skeleton stuffed inside of a tree like a Clive Barker-ass cannoli. Kid logic, Anyway, luckily one of the boys was so upset by what he'd seen that he told his parents that very night what they had found in the woods, and his parents notified the police. So let's talk about the crime scene. Well, first, just in case you're curious, a wych elm is the common name for a species of elm whose Latin name is almost glabra. Definitely pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, they're the most common species of elm on the British Isles, and they're considered indisputably the only native British species of elm. But as for the name, allegedly, it has nothing to do with witches, but instead comes from the Old English weiss, which meant pliant or supple. Yet, it's hard to fully divorce the root word weiss from the word that became witch, because weiss is also Old English for witch, and the word evolved phonetically to sound the same. So I think we can agree that the root word weiss of wych elm might be connected to the root word that became witch. But honestly, that's a research rabbit hole that I just kind of had to avoid falling down today, okay? Because there's enough here. And this video isn't about that. Alright, but if you know any witch-adjacent folklore surrounding wych elms, let me know, because I am curious about this. Okay, anyway, the cops arrive in Hagley Wood and they find the wych elm that the boys described. And inside, they find more than just a skull. They realize that there was an entire body stuffed inside the trunk of the wych elm. The skeletonized remains were determined to be that of an adult woman. Some fragments of her clothing were still intact enough for them to be able to determine what she was wearing when she died, and that, along with a gold wedding band on her finger and her almost fully intact teeth, gave them a good idea that they were possibly going to be able to identify her. There were some things to note about the condition of the woman's body when they found her. Uma, you talking? Oh. One, she was almost entirely intact, except for one of her hands, which was found some distance away from the tree. Stick a pin in that for later. Two, a wad of taffeta was found deep inside of her mouth, almost to her throat, which gave them the impression that her cause of death may have been suffocation. 3, considering the state of her remains, it was determined that she must have been in the tree for about 18 months. And 4, it was believed that her body wouldn't have fit into the tree once rigor mortis had set in, so she must have been placed inside the tree trunk while still warm. Now, the police immediately put effort into determining this woman's identity. They contacted all of the dentists in the area, trying to make a match through her dental records, and they checked their description of her against hundreds of missing persons, but none of them were a match. And it is important to note that this is a time of increased missing persons. In the midst of World War II, a lot of people were unaccounted for, either displaced or killed or just having vanished into the chaos. So there were probably a lot of missing people for the cops to check the woman in the wych elm against, but it turned out that none of them matched her description. So a description of the woman was published in the newspaper, and it read, "Her age is given between 25 and 40, most probably 35, height 5 foot, with light brown hair and dressed in dark blue and mustard-colored striped cardigan, mustard-colored skirt, blue crepe-soled shoes, size 5.5. All the garments were described as poor quality, and a wedding ring found amongst the bones was of rolled gold, probably worth about 2.6 today." But still, no leads turned up, and the trail went cold. Then, in 1944, a mysterious message started to show up around Witchbury Hill. The first was found at Hayden Hill Road, and it read, "Who put Lubella down the wych elm?" Shortly after this eerie bit of graffiti was found, another appeared on the wall on Upper Dean Street. This one read, "Who put Bella down the wych elm? Hagley Wood." Now, since no name had ever been tied to the woman in the wych elm, police believed that whoever was writing these messages knew the identity of the woman. They were hopeful that the name Lubella or Bella might help them trace the identity of this woman, but once again, they weren't able to follow this lead to anywhere substantial. And to this day, the woman in the wych elm has never been positively identified. But even if the investigation ended there, the graffiti didn't. Ever since 1944, these strange messages have appeared in the area, most notably on the Hagley Obelisk, an 84-foot monument that stands near the summit of Witchbury Hill, near Hagley Wood, where the woman's body was found. The message on the obelisk has reappeared year after year, reading, "Who put Bella in the witch elm?" It's a question that has an answer, but whoever knows the truth hasn't told it for over 80 years, and likely never will. So let's talk theories. This is kind of an infamous mystery, so of course there's quite a few theories circulating around. The most popular one is that the woman in the witch elm was a spy. This is the one that seems to stick in people's minds, I guess because it's like very movie-esque, right? Every time this crime is mentioned, you'll always have that one guy who's like, well, actually, it was solved and she was a spy. But the spy theory has a lot of contradictions, and it barely gives us any answers. So in 1953, journalist Wilfred Byford Jones wrote a series of articles about the murder. And in response, he received a lot of letters. And one of these letters came from a woman who called herself Anna of Claverley. And it started forebodingly.
Finish your articles, read the Witch Elm crime by all means. They are interesting to your readers, but you will never solve the mystery. The one person who could give you the answer is now beyond the jurisdiction of the earthly courts.
The details of Anna's letter implied that she knew the identity of the killer. So the police convinced her to meet with them along with the journalist. The letter writer was identified as Una Massop, and when she met with police, she told them that her ex-husband, Jack Massop, had been a pro-German conspirator who was part of a group with a bunch of other Nazi fanboys who were getting together, collecting information about munitions in the English West Midlands and feeding it to Germany. And according to Una, Bella was also a spy. But the reasons that she was killed and her method of death changed several times throughout every time that Una would tell the story. First, she told police that Bella was killed for knowing too much about the pro-German spy ring, and her body was stuffed in the witch elm to cover up the guy's tracks, right? Like that, don't you dump all your bodies inside tree trunks? Then she claimed that Bella was drinking in a pub with her ex-husband Jack Mossop and a bunch of these other like pro-German conspirators, and that she drank too much and passed out. So they took her out into the woods and put her into the tree trunk like to teach her a lesson, I guess like a prank or something. But when she woke up, she was unable to extract herself from the tree trunk, and there she died slowly, trapped inside the witch elm. However, investigators knew that this was impossible because there were no signs that Bella had been alive when she was put into the witch elm. There was no signs of a struggle or anything like that. And this story also didn't explain the wad of taffeta that was stuffed into her mouth. So they were like, this doesn't make sense, try again. And so she tried again and told a whole nother story, which was that Bella was killed by one of Jack Mossop's friends in this German conspirator group, and that Jack just helped the friend dispose of her body in the witch elm. Either way, according to Una, her ex-husband's involvement in this woman's murder drove him to madness. And she said that he died in an insane asylum a couple years later, plagued by dreams of a woman's skull inside of a tree trunk. Una's claims were investigated by police and military intelligence, but ultimately nothing came of it. They couldn't prove any of this. Still, this theory is frequently tied with another theory, which is that Bella was a German singer and actress named Hedwig Clara. Oh God, I'm gonna absolutely butcher this. Baller. Let's go with Baller. This is definitely wrong. Definitely wrong. In 1941, Joseph Jacobs broke an ankle while parachuting into a field in the West Midlands. Police were contacted when he was found by local farmers, and then he was turned over to military intelligence. Joseph Jacobs was determined to be a German spy. Now, amongst Jacobs' things was found a photo of a woman. This woman was identified as Clara Bollier, a German singer and actress. And before his execution, Jacobs claimed that Clara had been his lover and that she was also a spy who either parachuted in before him or might have followed him into the Midlands. Theories that try to pin Clara as the woman in the Wych Elm claim that she was either hiding out in the West Midlands and performing in music halls and learning to hide her German accent, and then the Gestapo found her and either forced her into being a spy, or that she came to the West Midlands willingly to be a spy for the Germans. Either way, there is no proof, aside from the photo found in Jacobs' effects, that Clara and Joseph Jacobs ever had any contact, or that Clara was a spy. The strongest argument that Clara might have been the woman in the Wych Elm comes from the fact that Clara was never seen in any films or anything after 1941, which would have been about the time that the woman in the Wych Elm is thought to have died. This is almost definitely just a coincidence, because Clara does have an official death record. Clara died in Berlin in December of 1942. Her cause of death is listed as a lung infection caused by veronal poisoning. And that would have been about a year later than when the woman in the Wych Elm was thought to have died, and quite a bit away from the Hagley Wood where her body was found. While this death record seems plausible, since veronal was a popular sleeping aid, and it's quite possible that Clara might have died from an overdose of the drug, either accidental or intentional, there are still those who cling to the theory that Clara is Bella in the Wych Elm, citing the fact that you can't really trust Nazi-era death records, which, fair enough, true, but let's move on from the espionage. There are some other theories about the identity of the woman in the Wych Elm. The one that I think is most plausible is that she might have been a sex worker who came to the area as a refugee. See, in 1944, a local sex worker contacted police to report another sex worker missing, who she named Lubella. And she said that Lubella had been missing for about 3 years and that she frequently worked out of Hagley Road, which would put the date when she was last seen around the time that the woman in the Wych Elm was believed to have been killed. Unfortunately, no further information was ever discovered about Lubella. Like I said, this was at the tail end of World War II, so if Lubella was a refugee, no one would be able to trace where she'd come from. She could have come from anywhere in Europe. It's even harder to trace her identity if she had been living on the margins of society. Considering the fact that this woman has remained unidentified for so long, this seems really plausible. That she might have been a refugee or a sex worker with very few personal contacts and no roots in the area. Now let's talk about, I guess, the most salacious theory, which is that the woman in the Wych Elm was ritualistically murdered by witches. This theory was put forth by Professor Margaret Alice Murray in 1945. Margaret Murray was an anthropologist and an archaeologist, and according to her, the murder of the woman in the Wych Elm was undoubtedly occult in nature. She cited the severed hand as proof, saying that the killer or killers had murdered the woman in a ritual to create a hand of glory. According to folklore, the creation of a hand of glory starts with the execution of a man on the gallows, a guilty man, preferably found guilty of murder. The hand that did the deed is then removed from the man, and some of the fat is taken from his body and made into a candle. And then that candle is shoved into his hand like some kind of cursed ass, candlestick holder. And the bearer of this grotesque trophy is afforded all kinds of special powers by wielding it, such as the ability to render people immobile and to unlock any door. The problem is, the woman in the Wych Elm wasn't hanged for murder, and the hand that was removed from her body wasn't taken. So if this was some kind of attempt at a hand of glory ritual, it strayed pretty far from the script. Also, no one has said definitively whether the hand was cut cleanly off or, might have been removed by animals and carried away from the body. So, it is possible that an animal might have taken the hand out, taken it away, and it is possible, because we don't know, because nothing says definitively whether it looked like a clean cut, like the hand was removed on purpose, or just a result of scavenging. And also, we have to consider the source of this theory. Margaret Murray was one of those turn-of-the-century occultists who liked to cherry-pick the beliefs and practices other cultures, like some kind of spiritual colonizer. Also casting doubt on Murray's theory is the fact that she wrote extensively about the European witch trials and put forth this theory that there was a vast witch cult in Europe who had been targeted for centuries by all of these violent trials and forced to take their religion underground and be secretive about it. So yes, Murray's entire thesis was basically the academic equivalent of those really obnoxious t-shirts that everybody's wearing in Salem this year. Now, obviously there's a lot of issues with Murray's theory that every person executed for witchcraft in Europe was secretly a part of some kind of ancient paganistic religion, and all of her writings have been thoroughly disproven by scholars in the years since. So suffice to say, there's really nothing of merit in Murray's theory that the woman in the witch elm was a victim of an occult sacrifice, especially when you consider that 1, she was clearly trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with the whole hand of glory bullshit, and 2, she went on to say that the woman in the witch elm was murdered by Romani people, who, according to Murray, are super into sacrificing people in the woods. Fuck yourself very much, Margaret Murray. P.S. Miss Margaret's debunked witch cult theory is literally the blueprint for Wicca, which we all know Gerald Gardner invented just so that he could hang out with naked groovy chicks in the woods. Anyway, the fact is, none of these theories really give us any answers as to who the woman in the witch elm was, let alone who put her there. Nor does it tell us who started writing the messages, asking the question, and calling her by name. Who put Bella in the witch elm? But I hope whoever did it saw those messages when they started to appear, and I hope it haunted them. I hope they worried that the messages had come from Bella herself, and that now that she'd been freed from the witch elm, she was coming for the one who put her there. In fact, I hope she did. And it's this thought that brings us to my book, Here Lies a Vengeful Bitch. Consider this the first entry in my series about things that inspired me to write my book, which is coming out August 2024 from Disney-Hyperion. And it's about a girl named Annie Lane who is dead, but definitely not gone. In Here Lies a Vengeful Bitch, Annie Lane is murdered, but she returns to her hometown of Hagley, New Jersey to hunt down her killer and have her revenge. And of course, along the way, she leaves some threatening graffiti, messages to her killer around town, inspired by the strange messages that were found on Witchbury Hill after Bella was discovered in the witch elm. And I wanted to tell you guys this story ahead of next week, because on Halloween, I'll finally get to reveal the cover of Here Lies a Vengeful Bitch, and this story is kind of a little clue. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss my Halloween video, and make sure you follow me everywhere else, because I'm gonna post the cover next week, and pretty soon I'm gonna have pre-order info too. So strap the fuck in, baby. It's happening. This book's coming. We're less than a year away. It's coming so fast. I also want to apologize for being away so long. If you haven't noticed, I moved. This is a different wall. It was really sudden. I'm probably going to talk about it more soon, because I've been working on some videos about decorating our new place, and I really love our new place. I really loved the old place, but a lot happened. I'll talk about it soon. But I spent an entire month in total turmoil trying to find a new place while also being on deadline and also going into, tourist season in Salem where I'm working really long extra hours. So it's been a crazy time. Anyway, I love the new place. I'm excited to show you more of it. And I'm also very excited to show you my cover next week. So I'm gonna see you soon, my little creepy crawlies.